Welcome to the Higher Ed AI Lab podcast, where we explore how AI is reshaping the future of higher education. I'm your host, Suraj. I'm a recent MBA grad from UC Berkeley with a deep background in the social impact space. As a former TA and someone working in AI, I'm fascinated by how it's transforming education and shaping future generations. Today, we have a very special guest in episode number 1, a first guest today, who's dedicated their entire career to empowering students through literacy and equity. They've worked across higher education, K through 12, shaping how we think about inclusive learning. They're an award-winning author, a passionate advocate for equity in education, and the director of English and Humanities Department at National Louis University. They've been at the forefront of figuring out and integrating AI into the humanities curriculum. So let's give it up for Dr. Ebony Wilkins.
Thank you for having me, Suraj. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, thank you so much for coming on. And before we jump into the questions, I'd love to kick off with the first one on if you can tell me something good, anything you're grateful for from today or this week.
That's a great question. Thank you. I am grateful for the opportunity to keep learning and to learn really all around me, learn from my students, learn from new networking opportunities. Most educators, we like to say we're lifelong learners. And so every opportunity just to learn more and to contribute where we can has brought me a lot of joy. Especially during these times. So
Yeah,
I am grateful for all of the opportunities just to connect and to learn and to grow. So
I love that. I mean, I think
yeah.
that's a perfect segue into what I'd want to ask you next is, what has been your latest learning with regards to artificial intelligence? How are you staying abreast about all the updates?
That's a big question. I have been learning as much as possible.
Yeah,
um, as I understand these large language models evolve every single day.
yeah,
So it is very difficult to keep up with what's out there. Um, I have taken a prompt engineering course. I have been leading a team. We're creating a reading and writing assessment tool to help students engage with AI in the most ethical ways possible, right? Um, and I have been talking with colleagues who are also doing similar work. I think it's been definitely eye opening. Um, there's so much to learn,
yeah,
and we have to learn it very, very quickly on top of all of our other projects and learnings. So, this AI has kind of taken the forefront, kind of jumped ahead of most things that we're working on, right? So, I have just been trying to keep my head down and just learn as much as possible, right?
yeah,
It's very difficult to get in front of students and teach them when we don't know yet ourselves. So we're learning with our students, which we should always be doing,
yeah.
right? So this has given me another opportunity to learn right alongside my students.
I love that. I Yeah, it's really interesting. I think often being on the student side, you don't. Um, it's sort of the assumption is that the teacher and the professor kind of knows everything,
Mhm.
and they're the person that's transmitting the knowledge to you. But it's fascinating just to hear that perspective, right? Of things being so new or in development, and that everyone is having to learn together and figure out what things look like. And
Mhm.
along the same lines, what I'd be interested to know is, what was the thought process that led to right now thinking about or creating these different groups about bringing in AI into and integrating it into a humanities curriculum? How did that conversation and decision first come about?
So I first learned from a colleague. There was an invitation for several faculty members to take a course to learn about AI. And to be quite honest, I wasn't fully, and this was winter of last year.
Yeah,
And to be honest, I wasn't fully plugged in. I wasn't fully interested, but I did sign up to take the course. Um, and I learned a little bit, but there was so much going on. And I was, AI, what is this? Do we need this right now? I wasn't fully on board, I have to admit,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And a reminder, I'm English and humanities. So I wasn't fully on board yet
Of course, yeah.
at the time, but that's where I first learned, like, oh, maybe this is something that we need to pay attention to. I then went to a conference, kind of one of an outside partner, and the message from one of the stages was that if you are not helping students learn AI, you are standing in the way. And that kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, oh, wait a minute. In an effort to stay grounded and stay committed to kind of our lane, right? Um, we could actually be harming students. So the message was clear. Like, if your students are going to be entering a different career world that you entered, and so this is the way that you need to support them and help prepare them for these next steps in their educational journey, but also in their future careers. And so that kind of woke me up a little bit, right? So I started
Yeah.
paying more attention and just doing as much research as possible. Like, what does this actually look like, especially for our composition classes, for our art classes,
Yeah.
for our philosophy classes? Like, what does incorporating AI even look like, right? What even is AI? I think another message from the stage was you are already using AI. AI is already a part of your lives, your weather apps, your editing supportive tools that you encourage students to use, your um, the phones and tablets, and AI is already amongst us, right? And
Yeah.
so I think that was comforting. Like, we're already using this. We just have to learn AI language, AI literacy, right? We have to learn how to communicate the tools we're learning, which our students will need to be able to communicate as well. So I think that was the start of my interest.
Yeah.
And I have learned a lot. I've learned a lot. I think mentioning it first, like, AI is very, very scary, especially if you don't know anything about it. But
Yeah.
once you break it down, like, we've already been using these tools. We've already incorporated them into our lives. So we just have to learn how to communicate and how to share that with students as well.
Definitely. There's a workshop I've done a few times now with groups of undergrad students, especially at
Mhm.
Georgia Tech and outside as well. And um, one of the things that we talk about, and especially in the opening of the workshop, it's about thinking clearly in the age of AI. And
Mhm.
this is one of the key things, is like recognizing places where, whether or not you want to engage with it, like it is prevalent, it is everywhere. It's in the Spotify algorithm, in the Netflix algorithms, it's in
Yeah.
like more and more, shops and retailers are using it for the way that they pick out products. And so by admitting and understanding that, and then taking in some of the awareness, you can be a little bit more, the hope is that you can be more mindful with it, or you can better understand how it's being used and where it's coming about.
Mhm. Mhm.
But
Exactly.
I think along the same line. So a question I have here is, do you, I mean, like, can we unpack the concept of, like, what does AI literacy even mean? I think I've heard that term a few times, and particularly in an educational context, yeah, of course, I would want, students to come out feeling more, quote unquote, AI literate. But
Mhm.
how is that term? What does that evolve to mean for you all?
Currently, for me, and I think we could probably all define this a little
Yeah,
differently, but to me, it means being able to communicate, um, orally, written, electronically, being able to communicate the tools that you're learning, being able to communicate what they are, how you're using these tools, um, and being able to ideally teach others and share with others about your process, right, of creating and thinking. I like to I think it's really important that we think of AI as a tool and not a replacement for our creative processes. And so I think being AI literate means I'm aware of um, I'm aware of these large language models, right? And
mm,
here's how I'm incorporating that into my creative and critical thinking process.
yeah,
Um, Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's what it to me, that's what it is.
I think that touched on a really good point there of like using and not replacing, and
Mhm,
how do we use these LLMs or just tools in general in a way that makes sure that they're enhancing and kind of furthering the educational process as opposed to
mhm,
undercutting it.
mhm,
This is something I've seen across different faculty in different universities, but something, I guess, a concern that's come up again and again of, either quality of writing being super poor because people are using these in their essays, or, questions around plagiarism or concerns of people using it without citing it. And I'd love to know, you've mentioned it a little bit about, you know, thinking critically about what's the future of comprehension and reading and composition, like you mentioned. How are you navigating that tension between AI use and evaluation and thinking?
very carefully. Um, there I think that is the bulk of the concern from faculty,
I'm
right?
sure,
Are the
yeah.
number of plagiarism cases that, um, we're seeing. N n One, it's trying to identify, is this, original thought? Is this original writing? Or is this AI supported writing? Or is this AI replaced? Is this fully AI? I mean, it's a delicate dance, right? Because the tools, again, evolve every single day. So,
Yeah,
and the models are learning from us. So it's their the models are um, ideally there to support our creative and critical thinking processes, but they're also learning and evolving, and it becomes more difficult every day to determine whether this is original writing or whether this is a replacement or a duplicate,
yeah,
or so that it's a very, very delicate dance right now. I think the best way to go about it is to explain to students what tools are available to them, but also to continue to encourage students to use their voices. I think I most of my students are first year students, so they're just out of high school,
yeah,
and the writing requirements are very different from high school, and so I think encouraging students to have confidence in their writing voices and what they are able to produce on their own is really important. So we're trying to send that message as well. Like, we want to hear your voices. We
yeah,
want you to be creative. It's okay in this space to um, you know, think independently and to be creative and to think critically and to um, be as authentic as possible. Share your stories. I think that message is important.
yeah,
And then um, at the same time, we want to say, here are all the tools that are here to support you as you're sharing your authentic experience and your stories. And so I think if we're communicating that to students, like, your voice is enough, but here are these other tools here that are available to you if you would like to use them. And again, it's your voice is what we're looking for. Explain to us how you are using these other tools to continue your message, right?
yeah,
I think um listen, the demand for productivity and speed of product and output, it just increases for all of us
yes,
every year,
yeah,
every position. And so I think for my first year students, they're dealing with a lot. They're navigating being a new adult. They're navigating having all of these new responsibilities. They're navigating their work life, their family life, all of these outside political factors. They're
yeah,
navigating a lot, right? Always, but especially now. And so I think
yeah,
the um the maybe pull to do things as quickly as possible, no matter what it looks like,
mm,
is very understandable.
yeah,
So they want to meet our expectations. They want to meet their own expectations. But if we those of us who have been adults longer than my first year students, we know that a lot of that is not realistic. I
Yeah.
mean, we're not going to be able to produce always and constantly and more and more and more and more and more, right? So we're all doing the best we can. So I think students, when they hear, here's a new tool that I can use, ooh, that'll cut, yeah, I don't have to spend 6 hours writing. I can spend one. Let's do it.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense, right? They're making choices. So I think that's a long way to say, I think we explain to them that no matter how long it takes, we want your authentic voice. Your voice is enough. Here are some tools that will help you get to the product that we're looking for, right? But it'll help you it should help you also examine your process along the way. And that's the goal, is to be as authentic as possible
Yeah.
and be able to explain the tools that you use to get to that place.
I think that really resonates a lot with me and what I've heard and seen in a few places as well of like um, in a world where output can be practically infinite at this point. Like I can say I want 10 versions of this and it doesn't take like what used to take at least an overnight, pulling an all-nighter in a library now can take, like you said, like an hour and you have even a minute. Um,
Even a minute.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so in a world where, output is theoretically infinite, how do you education still is like process dependent and authentic voice. I was just helping somebody with their personal statement, and it's like realizing that, like, sure, it can sound flowery, but when I'm reading it, I know this person is like, you're not showing up here. Right. And
Hmm.
ultimately, like, writing, like, you still need to do the thinking and the reflecting and the
Hmm.
deciding of the words that most reflect you in order for
Hmm.
this to be your work.
Hmm.
And so I'm seeing the shift more and more, maybe particularly in writing as well, around like having to shift away from just the output being the focus, but more towards the process and the
Hmm.
understanding.
Hmm.
Um, but I'd be interested, like, is there a way that you've seen AI being used that has excited you about, or that you're like, oh, this is interesting and this is a specific use case to look into?
I love learning, so I think it's all interesting.
Yeah,
I mean, I like to um I'm at the place where I'm comparing the LLMs. Like this LLM is the output, the writing is fantastic.
yeah,
This output, the writing is very robotic and inauthentic. I can tell the difference. So I'm the prompt engineering course taught me how to create prompts, but also to like identify which prompts will work for which like large language models. And so I'm kind of at that place where I'm
yeah,
like looking between them. So that's very interesting to me. Um, I think um, helping students to, I don't know that I think it depends student by student whether they're ready for that conversation yet. But I think um, I'm just thinking about how we introduce this to students. I think it's so important to, as much as we're intrigued by all of this new technology, I think it's important to always come back to like our students and their voices and their stories and their experiences. The LLMs aren't going to know that. If they use the same LLM, the output will the chatbot will remember
mm,
parts of our stories, right? And it will start to build like a portfolio or a story for us. So it will remember some things, but writing and communicating and sharing your stories, you're right. You can tell that there is um, an emptiness
yeah,
um, when you rely too heavily on the chatbot. So I think as long as we're communicating that to students, um, that's kind of the sweet spot. I think that's where the bulk of our like lessons will be for a while and should be really. Um, I'm finding it really interesting to not only compare the LLMs, but also to find ways to center students and human voices
yeah,
and human stories. So I think as much as we can stay there while learning, I think that's going to be the goal. Um, because the LLMs are not supposed to replace us.
Yeah.
Um, they're supposed to be a support for our learning. And um, it, robots, they can't, the chatbots are not going, they're not supposed to replace us.
Yeah.
And if we handle them and use them as supports appropriately, that won't happen.
Yeah.
Ideally.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, we'll see, right? We'll see.
With bated breath.
I mean, I think about I mean, we've seen iRobot, right? So I don't know. I hope
Oh my gosh.
but
Yeah.
it's yeah.
No, part of the reason why, honestly, that I really wanted to have you on, especially as one of our first guests, is I think it's a really, this is a really tricky, it feels like a really tricky topic, right? I think the moment anyone thinks English or humanities and they think about ChatGPT, LLMs, they're thinking, oh no, why would you want these two to mix? Right. And I think I remember in our first conversation, um, something that really stood out to me was like the approach of like you've been in this space, like you've been an educator and teaching English to children and to adults, and so it's like you understand the importance of reading and reading comprehension and cultural literacy as well. And yet there's a little bit of you that's like, it's what I really appreciated was like not being afraid of learning more about the tool and learning and like diving deep into it and making sure that students are feeling prepared for the quote unquote world outside, like real world outside of college.
Mhm.
Um, Something I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about is I think you've mentioned this in one of our previous conversations, but around how we've handled how education's handled different technology shifts in the past. I think um, the internet and how you might see some parallels here.
Yeah, I remember, I'm aging myself a little bit, but I remember um, dial-up internet. I remember, so when I was in college, I didn't walk around with a cell phone. We had to go back to our rooms to check our voicemails if we wanted to connect with friends
That's wild.
and meet up at a party. Like we had to run back home, check the voicemail, and then find out where everybody was, and then we meet. You know what I mean? Like, so I remember. I know to you that sounds crazy. But
Yeah.
there was a time when we didn't have personal laptops, when we didn't have cell phones, when we didn't have access. We had to sign up for our time in the computer lab. If we had a paper due, we had to make sure we got to the lab, typed on the computer, printed the paper before the deadline, right? So
Yeah.
um, I remember um, being hesitant but excited about the opportunity to like not have to go through all those steps. Oh wait, I could just have a computer at home. Fantastic. How do I make this work? I'll tell you a quick story. I used to teach at a high school, and one of the computer teachers sent a message just saying, "Hey, if you were throwing a bunch of computers away, if you need one, let us know," because they were buying new computers.
Yeah.
So I was like, absolutely. So the computers, they put a big, huge, the computers were, I mean, huge, like very difficult to carry type monitors. Put it in my car. I took it home and, with the full intention that I was just going to play around with it and see what I could do. Well, there was no modem in the computer. I thought I was going to be able to get online, right? So there was no
Yeah.
modem. So I went to, I think like Best Buy or something. And I was like, I would like to get online, but I don't know how to do that. And they're like, oh, you need a modem. And I was like, okay, what does that look like? So I went and got a modem. I went home. And for an entire weekend, I followed the instructions. Took the computer apart. I put the modem in. And do you know, I got that modem to work. So
Wow. Let's
I was
go.
so excited. So I think I love learning. And I don't know how I did that, but I did it. And so I think I tell you that story because now we know what a time before AI looked like. Now we know what a time when there's this introduction, a rush of all of this technology that we don't understand is here. I think it is an opportunity for us to like break open that computer and put that modem in, so to speak, right? Like
Mm.
just dive in, go ask for help, ask for the instructions, and spend a little time and learn to see what it looks like. Um, you know, initially, I was super hesitant because I'm
Yeah.
thinking English and humanities, we don't want students using these tools. That's like defeats the whole purpose, but it doesn't. I think it really can be a support for helping students have access, helping students communicate their stories, um, helping students juggle all of the responsibilities that hit them as soon as they turn 18. I think it can be a support. It can be yet another way of um, just jumping all the way in. I mean, um, I remember a time before, you know, any technology, and not that far back, not that old. But
Yeah.
I remember the legwork. I remember the steps that we had to take that students no longer have to take. And one day, like your daughter, like
Yeah.
one day our next generations, they're going to take even fewer steps than we had to, but they're going to be creating and they're going to be thinking critically, but just in a different way than we did.
Yeah.
Right? So I think rather than shying away, I think it's an opportunity for us to learn and it's an opportunity for us to jump on board. I think the biggest kind of thing I go back to is the change is happening anyway.
Yes.
And often change is uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you're comfortable, the you have kind of a set way of doing things that you're comfortable with. And I understand that, but the change is happening. The tools are here.
Hmm.
The LLM creators are creating and the models are just it's hard to even
Keep up. Yeah.
comprehend,
Yeah.
right? But the best we can do is jump on board and just learn as much as possible, whether we decide to use them or not. I think we often forget the part of the conversation where students are like, yeah, we know that these tools exist, but I'm going to pass. And that's okay too.
Yeah.
I think the goal is just the awareness and the education part that is the key.
Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing that. I think
Yeah.
it's I think important, and it's nice to hear you just share it. Like it's not too long ago that like we've seen massive shifts of right of
Massive shifts.
in a
Absolutely.
higher education context in which there was no internet. And like when I went to Georgia Tech, like I can't imagine what that experience would have been. Right, like with a new internet, like for me everything that I possibly did was like Google Slides, Google Docs. Like it was constructed an entirely new educational experience constructed on the foundation of what the internet now could allow us to do.
Mhm.
Right,
Mhm.
so thinking about
Mhm.
like real-time collaboration, sharing ideas while you're in your dorm room, someone else is somewhere else, and being able to allow for both more flexibility, also more unique soft skill development opportunities, if you will, of
Absolutely.
you know some.
Absolutely.
And so I think I do think more and more as I'm exploring the space, I realize that like I don't think it's too early for any of us to call ourselves experts in this field, but it's really a chance for us to learn together of what this future looks like, of a world of education on this foundation now of all of these tools being available as options,
Right.
like you said.
Right.
um,
Right. And there doesn't have to be a limit to that.
yeah.
I think the limits are what make us most comfortable because we learn them and we like to stay in that comfortable place.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, that's just not realistic, right? Especially when we're asking uh, all of these intelligent folks out here to keep creating and keep producing. I mean, this is just what that looks like,
Yeah.
you know. So we have to lean in.
There's so I have a few more questions before we wrap up, but I think one that comes to my mind most is, you have a background in inclusive education and thinking about representation, particularly when it comes to reading and people, and again, like you said, authentic voices. What are your thoughts on how AI tools? I think there's so much around how they might not be good at that because of the data set that they're using, and the bias that they might be um, subject to. But I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on how they can help be part of sort of the solution rather than propagating the problem.
Mm, yeah, I mean, that's such a great question. So the tools, it's an output for, it's like Google, right? It's like using these tools gives you access to all of the information that is out there and available. If the bulk of the content that is out there speaks disparagingly to a certain group of people, the output is going to tap into that as well, whatever output, whatever large language model you're using. And so I think one of the most important parts about learning AI is one, the ethical use of the tools, but also critically analyzing the output.
Mm,
Um, one one way that I can tell that students are using AI is if they are just copying and pasting and not reading at all. And I think there has to be some critical thinking involved on the human side,
yeah.
because the AI output, the LLM output is just tapping into what's out there, and unfortunately, there there's probably more harmful message, especially when you're talking about when you talk about culture, when you talk about race, when you talk about language, when you talk about gender, sexuality.
Yeah.
There's more. I don't quote me on this. There's a lot of harmful information still disseminated, and so the LLMs tap into that. So I think it's important while we're learning to be able to remind ourselves that AI is not always right. The
Mm,
output is not always accurate. The AI is not always an authentic representation, and that we have to be critical analyzers, critical thinkers of the output and users of the output. And I think in the same way that we have to be critical thinkers and critical analyzers, um, it could help us access more information. It could help us tap into more voices, um, more cultures, more experiences that we weren't able to have access to prior. But I do think it's super, super important that we remain in a critical, thinking space
yeah.
when using these LLMs. It gives us access to
Yes.
more, but I believe that equates to more responsibility on the human side and not less.
Yeah.
So we have to always question, always still seek primary and secondary sources
Yes.
um, to get to the truth. The LLMs will call everything a truth
Yes.
and give us a whole bunch of it. It'll condense all of it, and it still could be false information.
Yes.
So it gives us access to more, but that means our responsibility is greater.
Yeah.
It may save us a little bit of time. It may help us, think through our process quickly, get to a product more quickly. However, it's our responsibility to identify what's accurate and what's true information, um, always. And I think it means greater responsibility on our part, for sure.
That's so, yeah, so well said. Absolutely. Like that really, I think there's a lot to just sit with there too. I think like, yeah, thank you for sharing that. Like anything else, it is a tool and it's the way that we're using the tool that can have implications. And I've seen certain use cases. I've been reading about certain use cases of people, using AI and language learning models to help preserve certain languages. So because there might
Mm,
only be a
mhm.
few people in the world that can even speak
Yes,
or write that language. And so
right.
being able to preserve a language, and at the same time it could also be used to create what we're now seeing as like AI slop on social media of just endless content that's generated that seems like it's something, but actually is saying like nothing,
Yeah,
right?
right, right.
Yeah,
It to that point, the language, the preservation of the language, so important for current and future generations. But there has to be um, at least one person who speaks that language who can,
yeah,
look through the output and make sure it's all authentic. Or accurate. I have I've used ChatGPT and the output was absolutely not correct. And so I've, adjusted my prompt, but I also gave feedback like this is actually not correct information. And the chatbot will say, "Oh, okay, no problem. Let's try this."
yes,
So yes, I mean that's a perfect example, the language preservation.
yeah,
The output will the thing about the output, it no matter what tool you're using, it'll always give you something,
yes,
but you have to be able to identify whether that's addressing your prompt or getting to the heart of the truth that you're looking for, right?
yeah.
Um, yeah, it's a
That's
very delicate dance. Going back to your very first question.
yeah. No, and I think it's exactly like you said it. And I think honestly, more and more I'm seeing like that is a crucial place for educators, right? To play the role of the same way that we might have broken down and looked at certain sources in a class about this author versus that author. Or I remember in some of my international affairs classes and reading groups, like looking through some of the methodologies and being like, what's being critical about, just because it's published in a paper doesn't mean that the research design was perfect, right? So that critical
Correct.
lens is now a place. Now we have to even more of a need to learn and refine that critical lens, because now
Hmm.
you've got output that if you say like don't respond to this, it will still respond to this, right? It is an
Yeah, absolutely.
it is an a never ending, always responsive chatbot, and so
Right. Right.
which has implications, right? It's
Sure.
not always going to be correct for sure.
I like to think of it as it gives us more information to work with. It gives us more material to introduce into the classroom. Let's take a look at um, our assessments, pull out your rubrics. Let's analyze what this chatbot just gave us. Is this the information we were looking for? Like, that's a place of learning,
Yeah,
right? That helps students understand where they're being assessed, how they're being assessed, but also it gives them content to compare
yeah,
to, right? And now create your own and see what the differences are. That gives us a whole new conversation,
yeah,
which I mean, we do a little bit of that already using um, sample essays, sample compositions, for example, sample final projects, right? But we could ask a chatbot, give us, certain prompt. We type in a certain prompt. Give us a final project on the topic of art exploration in 1960. I don't know.
right,
Right?
yeah, yeah,
It'll give you
literally,
anything,
yeah,
anything, any prompt you can create, it'll give you. But now you can take a look and say, now, does this make sense? Is this the information we were looking for? Is this even actually accurate?
yeah,
Let's do some digging, right? So there are so many different ways that you could use these LLMs, but I think the key is communicating with students as much as we are communicating with these technologies, explaining the process. This gives educators really the opportunity to one learn alongside our students, which we should be doing anyway, and it encourages and reminds us to communicate the why and the how with students. That's the learning, right?
yeah,
It's really how we find the it to me, that's like the joy in learning. We're learning with our students. We learn something new every day. We learn a new way to present information and to analyze information, and we are learning new ways to create and communicate. I mean, I think that's the sweet spot.
absolutely. Oh, I
Mhm.
love that. I love that approach. I think taking a step back and kind of putting on the lens or the hat of an educator or a faculty member, right, in some subject, and um, who's like, okay, yeah, I'm ready. I see. I've seen transitions happen before. We're on the cusp of something. We're in the at the beginning stages of a world post AI, like, and they want to start integrating it maybe into their curriculum, but they're feeling a little overwhelmed. Like, what would you say is step number one, maybe for them to go through that process?
Step number one, I believe, is opening the lines of communication with students. Um, Having a conversation about what is AI. Like, start at the beginning. What do we think this is? What does this look like? How are we already using this? How do you feel about it? Here's how I feel about it. Um, the last time I taught a composition class, I we talked about what is AI and what is this? How can this be useful to us? Do we need to use this? Why would we need to? And the conversation was amazing. Some of the students said, "I'm not interested. I don't need it."
Yeah.
And some students said, "Well, I can kind of see, I don't really love writing. I can see how, helping me when I get stuck, that a tool could help me jog my thinking." And that conversation was really meaningful because then it became less about trying to sneak it past Dr. Wilkins.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And more about, hey, Dr. Wilkins, I'm running behind. Here's how I'm thinking about using this. Here's how I'm thinking about using ChatGPT for this certain project.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, oh, actually, that could work. But why don't you think about using it in this way so that you can still adhere to the, expectations of the project, still save you some time, but still, give you some creative license as well. So I think opening the floor is in the classroom. I say open the floor means open the conversation in the classroom, because I think once students understand that we are experts in our fields, but we are not expert in this field. We are learning with you. And I think it becomes a shared understanding. Like, let's explore this together versus how do I sneak this past my professor at 11:58 before my project is due. I mean, it kind of reshapes their thinking, but it also incorporates us all into the same conversation. Like,
Yeah.
that's the goal, right? Um, so I think that's step one. Step two is acknowledge the discomfort, acknowledge the reasons why you feel this is not a good idea, and then lean in anyway. Lean into the learning.
Yeah.
Spend time before you completely shut it down, just spend time learning. Um, Once I told you in the beginning I was very hesitant and kind of dismissive, but once I started learning like what this could look like and how this could be a tool that enhances my creative process, my output, how I spend my time. Once I figured out, like, this is just like the internet. This is just like that big, huge phone that I used to carry, or, the big, do you remember Saved by the Bell? Are you too young? You remember?
Just a little.
Yeah, okay. Zach Morris in Saved by the Bell, he used to have this huge, like, suitcase phone,
Yeah.
this phone you'd pull out. So I remember all of these transitions, right? And now we're walking around with tablets and cell phones and internet, and now we have these AI tools. So the change is always going to come.
Yeah.
And so I encourage faculty to explore, just keep learning, um, rather than saying no, because the one of the fears is these robots could replace us, and that's a very real fear.
Mhm.
I mean, that's a very real thought. So it's less. I'm not diminishing or not acknowledging the real, very real threat, right? But I like to frame the approach just as a new opportunity to learn. Like, I don't want to be replaced, so let me learn about this.
Yeah.
Let me see how I can add this to my toolkit, right? And so that's the recommendation I give to faculty. I understand the hesitation, I understand the fears. Part of our role is to learn as much as we can and then communicate and work with students to help them get to the next place, right? Help them to explore and grow. Like, higher education is all about providing safe spaces for students to explore
Yeah.
and to grow and to enjoy that process.
Yeah.
Um, and I think faculty we should be doing that too.
Yeah.
Like, I want to have fun. You know what I mean? As I love being a professor. I love being
Yeah.
the director of a program. I have fun doing this work because I get to keep learning and I keep exploring and keep growing. So
Wow.
that's what I would encourage for faculty. I understand the hesitation and the fear, and there is a very real possibility we could one day be replaced. However, it's not today.
Yeah.
So today, let's spend time learning,
Yes.
and figuring it out how to um, embrace the change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Wilkins. It's been lovely and I think refreshing to hear this perspective of course, like we don't know it all, right? There's so much
Yeah.
that we're learning on a day-to-day basis, but I
Hmm.
think something that really stood out to me about your perspective is one of, this isn't your main field. Like you're not a PhD in machine learning. And so
Right.
but
Right.
but you're and it's acknowledging the fear, acknowledging the hesitation. And I love how you've opened up communication with your students and are then able to using the open communication, the honesty, and the learning mindset to learn alongside with them. And you actually create, I would say, a more growth oriented, learning environment where I think, as you said it, rather than them trying to sidestep and try to hoodwink you at the last minute because of the anxiety they're feeling, how are you now
Hmm.
able to open the conversation early so that maybe we're using it in a more intentional way, that we've incorporated AI use in a meaningful way?
Hmm.
But yes, I know we're approaching time, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing your perspective and for
Yeah, of
being
course.
our first guest. Before
Be-
before I close out,
Sure.
I would love to ask just one question of sort of I'd like to keep it as a running question that we end on.
Hmm.
But what is one piece of advice that someone told you on your journey that sticks with you today that you still think about?
First of all, thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure, Suraj. I really appreciate the opportunity to share. Um, I write children's books. And so I think the best piece of advice that I have been given is to trust my voice. And so I would encourage everyone listening to trust your voice, and to do not be afraid to share your story. It's very important. It changes lives. Your stories can change lives. So trust your voice.
Trust your voice.
Hmm.
Wow, I love that. And it goes back to what we talked about, authenticity. And
Authenticity.
yeah,
Hmm.
well,
Thank you so much for having me.
yes, thank you so much for coming on.